So why has Midnight Oil decided to put out a live LP? People must have been suggesting it for years.
Yeah, I think one of the most asked questions directed to members of Midnight Oil over the last decade has been, for a band that's made its live reputation in the clubs and the pubs and later the entertainment centres of the world, how come you're the only band that hasn't put out a live album? It makes sense. And usually the answer was that the band members themselves didn't have a whole lot of live albums in their collection, with a few notable exceptions, and that really we felt that the live arena could be separated from TV and from radio and from listening in your living room, because you just in those environments you just don't have the sights and the smells and the volume and the excitement, and it can't really be put down into a one-dimensional form. But we finally got our arm twisted because we uncovered a whole lot of tapes that we didn't know were still around, and we found some fantastic performances which we think actually overcome some of those problems. And because it's not a live greatest hits package, then I think people that have come and seen the shows will be able to put this on, crank it up a bit, and actually really enjoy the nights that they remember of the Oils.
Do you think people who have only heard your studio recordings will get a different impression of the band when they hear the live record?
If you haven't seen Midnight Oil live and you only know the band from the records, particularly the later records, then you are in for a right royal surprise, and you may love it and you may not, but I think that you'll certainly get off on the energy of the band and the live recordings. We don't have two characters, although sometimes people have said that this is a band that very much has two characters, because it makes crafted records and yet it's a very primitive live band in many senses. I think that a lot of live records are pretty boring, are a little bit repetitive. Maybe they've tried to make them sound a bit better than they were, cover up the mistakes. Maybe they've just concentrated on putting the better known songs on. What we've tried to do is just simply take the songs which were the very maximum songs in terms of the impact that they had on us as players and the performers and the writers of the songs. So it's very much our taste as musicians as well that you're hearing here. So I think it's a record that you can listen to more than once and get more and more out of, because the music is not just all on the surface. There's a lot going on underneath, but it's got a vibrancy and a rawness that can never be translated except in a club or in a room or a theatre or a stadium or wherever. And you're probably going to get another side to the Oils that you might not have had. If you've been to shows and you've been down there and you've seen the band live, then I reckon you'll get off even more.
How did you decide what recordings to select for the album?
It was a case of just going back and listening to all the stuff that we'd recorded, whether we even had a small tape machine or a OB van outside, and taking the very best of the music which had an impact, which moved us, not on a song that was recognisable, not on a song that was a hit in one place or another, but on a song which measured up at the excitement level, so that your spine started to wobble a little bit and the hairs on the back of your head started to move around a bit. And a song where the band actually sort of was all in the same place at the same time. I mean, we can have bad gigs like anybody else where, for a variety of reasons, someone's not having such a good night. And I think that these songs are the sorts of songs where everybody has a good night on the same song at the same time, in the same spirit. And that's we were very lucky to be able to have a whole heap of different tunes to pick from and end up with this collection. But as well as that, we've also included stuff in the live set which is, in a sense, the shades of the Oils, both in the segging things that we've done and also in a couple of little surprises that there are on the live album, so that you're not simply just hearing a high, Chicago or high Brussels or, high Coonabarabran, this is Midnight Oil from Australia and we want to play, our greatest hit. it's actually a band that walks up and says, well, look, we have got a heap of songs here that we have written over the years, and these are the ones that we're going to play tonight, except instead of having to go to the show, you can sit in your own lounge room and listen to them.
How is it that these live performances are so energetic?
Oils on Stage is one of those visceral, wild, curly, very emotional, very instinctive experiences. Because we made our career and our name as a band by live performances, they've always been pretty intense, and we don't over-tour, so we like to hold the excitement of what we're doing in. And when we decided that we were going to release live recordings, we were looking for the songs that had that level of intensity and edginess about them.
Can you tell us about this gig at the Brisbane Boondall Centre, where quite a few of the songs on Screaming Blue were recorded? Why was it such a good night?
The Brisbane shows came at the end of the 1990 Blue Sky Mine World Tour, when we'd been in and out of North America and Europe maybe half a dozen times. And it came at the end of a 2.5-year stretch where the band had been really taking its music from Australia to other parts of the world, and had seen the audience grow from basically club and theatre dates into playing to 60 and 70,000 people in the festivals through Europe, and having strong audiences in the big cities in America. And I think by the time we got home, those songs were well and truly in the groove, and there wasn't much that we really had to do about them except get up and let the energy of the audience, which was very strong, and our own energy, which was as much relief as it was anything else, carry us through. And they're the kinds of shows which I think that still make live rock and roll something that it's great to be in the middle of it, because it's not just a one-sided affair, it's a two-sided thing where you've got an audience that has an enormous amount of commitment to what you're doing and to your songs, and you don't have to work so hard. You just have to get up and be true to yourself, and you end up with the sorts of sounds that can knock the roof off the building if you're having a good day.
What sort of record were you trying to make?
The band had been looking through the material, and we decided that if we were going to put a live album out, the live album was just going to have to go at a cracking pace from beginning to end. Really, you can put up with a couple of slow or medium pace songs live because it gives you a breather and a break for both the band and the audience. But I think at home, if this is going to be a record which you're going to put on when you've got your mates around for a party and you want to really have an exciting time, then really we didn't want to stack it with a whole lot of slow songs. So we really picked things which just burn your ears, and that's why it starts with a song like Screaming Blue and ends with Powderworks, and there's a whole lot of stuff in the middle which hardly lets up. And I mean, that's the sort of live album that we want to make, rather than saying, oh look, let's put a collection of our most known radio songs together. This is a real. I think this is much more Midnight Oil to do it this way.
How is it that some of the older songs like Brave Faces have stood the test of time?
Yeah, it was very interesting to us when we went back and listened to all the tapes of shows that we'd done, going way back to Capitol Theatre shows in Sydney, in Australia, in the early 80s. And we found that some particular songs just seemed to settle every night and to be quite compelling. And I don't know why that is. I think that's the mystery of music, that there are some songs that work really well live and there are others that work well as records. And Brave Faces is one of those songs which we worked up when we did Place Without a Postcard record, which was a very Australian sounding, very Australian subject matter record. It's a song which has got more than, just a verse and a chorus in it. It's got other bits in it. It's got riffs and kind of playing parts in it. And it's always an interesting song to play. And so when you get to Brave Faces, you know that you're going to have an interesting excursion from start to finish, and it sounded good.
What stage was Midnight Oil's career when Only the Strong first came out?
And Only the Strong first came out, we were at a fairly desperate stage, as I remember, because we'd been to England in 1981, recorded with Glyn Johns' Place Without a Postcard. That record had done well in Australia, but had been almost ignored overseas, and there were problems with record companies. We went back in 82 without a deal, without much money, and we ended up in the West End of London. That sounds glamorous, but it was actually down at Shepherd's Bush, and we lived in Goldhawk Road above the Townhouse studio and made 10 to 1 with a then very unknown producer-engineer called Nick Launay, who has become much more well known, much more famous since, and made a record which really I think has all the band's anger and the frustrations of the time. Because I think that we'd reached a point where we'd been making music by then for 4 or 5 years. We'd seen a lot of other bands come up, get a lot better known. We'd developed a big live following, but we hadn't sold the records in the numbers that perhaps we should have at that point. And we needed to really start again with our music and redirect it in a more modern way. And it was just a great combination working with Nick. And Only the Strong came out. I remember. I mean, I think it's not overstating it to say that I was having a mini nervous breakdown. It's funny looking back at it, but it wasn't at the time. In the studio, we were homesick. We didn't have the dough. We were uncertain whether the band was going to pull through this period. We're not sure even that we had a record deal to put it out. And all this frustration came out. And Only the Strong, if you listen to the recorded version, bristles with all this anger and frustration from a young band. And the live version that ends up in Screaming Blue, I think, has a fair deal of that as well. It's also a song that has been in the set now for 10 years, because it's one of those songs you just bring out when you really need to prove it, what sort of band you are.
Stars of Warburton seems to express your love for the Australian countryside. How is the current state of the Australian environment?
I think we would say that awareness about what we're doing to the backyard and to our home and to grass and the earth and rivers and things is greater, but the consequences of continuing to build heaps of motor cars and freeways and try and high-rise our way out of trouble means that the planet, and in Australia the planet, is still continuing to suffer. And that is something which all people now feel and acknowledge, and it's something that has always been exceedingly important to us. And when we sit in the back of the touring bus, as most bands do, I mean, some people watch videos, of situation comedies or cop shows or Arnold, what's his name, being Mako with 3 sentences. But we generally tend to sort of be travelling during the day and looking outside to what's going on. And we were horrified to drive across the middle of America, and see one lonely tree, in the midst of 1,000 highway signs. And Stars of Warburton is one of those songs which is actually written from the perspective of being in another place but looking back at home and seeing that in Australia we're lucky because we've still got a lot of natural beauty, but also there's, I think, a tinged element of, not remorse, but a contemplation about what it is that's happening to our environment in Australia as well, and knowing that we've got to do more to look after it.
The recording of Progress on Screaming Blue comes from a gig you did on the streets of New York. How did it feel to sing about Manhattanism in Manhattan?
The Exxon show in New York was one of those lucky, rare, exhilarating, kind of up-yours experiences that you really hope to have when you're in a band like the Oils, where you've had a strong political edge to your lyrics and to your actions over the years, but you don't often get to sort of dissect the belly of the beast and give it a dose of your own medicine. And I think the adrenaline pump on the back of that little flat-top truck that day was as great as anything I've ever experienced. And I think that Progress was a perfect song for it, because it's a raw, extremely confronting lyrically, right in your face song about, hey, what's going down? Who's benefiting from all this and who's suffering? And we were in the right place to sing it at the right time. And, Progress in front of Exxon, with a bit of a picture of what happened in Prince William Sound, is an abiding image and memory for me.
When Beds of Burning became a hit, it brought a lot of people's attention to the predicament of the Aboriginal people. Would you say the situation has improved at all since then?
I think the situation for some Aboriginal people has got better. I think that I think realistically, Aboriginal people in Australia still, just looking at the statistics, have a mortality rate which far exceeds the white population. The kids are dying still of diseases, most of which have been imported from the West. There are still outbreaks of petrol sniffing, and a lot of Aboriginal people have their alcohol dependency. The settlements out in the desert have been a failure, in as much as the meeting of the two worlds has been a pretty potent mix for disaster. The outstation movement has been more successful, whereby Aboriginal people have moved back onto their land and have greater control of their own destiny and have a better chance of retaining some culture. There is a new initiative in Australia directing millions and millions of dollars towards Aboriginal people and Aboriginal causes. One would only hope that it falls into the right hands and actually improves a lot of our original Australians by a considerable degree, but already, there's enormous factionalism involved. There's a lot of controversy about it. The directing of the money seems to be unclear. It's a gradual process. I mean, I think things are getting gradually better, but incidences of racism, like we've seen in the last couple of months in Australia, certainly haven't improved the image here or overseas.
Sell My Soul has some great interplay between guitarists Rotzi and Magini. That interplay is one of the hallmarks of the band, isn't it?
Well, I think that Jim Magini and Martin Rotzi have always been really underrated guitarists because they're just not into Mako guitar sort of heroics. They won't sponsor amplifiers and, play with one finger up in the air like a baboon. Not that I got anything against baboons, I should say. They're probably an endangered species by now. But, that twin guitar aspect of the Oils has always been a really strong feature of the sound of the band and the way in which the band plays and attacks its music. And the fact that both of them interplay and interact a lot, that you don't have a lead guitarist and a rhythm guitarist as such. You've just got two people that happen to talk to one another with their instruments, which happen to be guitars, makes for a very meshed but also quite creative sound, which isn't wimpy at all. And Soul is probably one of those songs which is a bit more rhythmic than some of the things that we do, and so you hear there's a little bit more space for them to sort of play off one another, but they don't get into kind of cliche, fast cliche. They do other things which I always enjoy listening to, and I hope other people sort of hear the little bits and pieces that they very quietly do as well.
Tell us what you see are the main qualities of the song Sometimes.
Sometimes is a song that we always used to end the night, well, often used to end the night with, because it was, in a way, a very difficult song to put anything else after. It just has one of those anthemic qualities about it which feels like you're wrapping up the night, and so we almost always used to either end the main part of the set or the encore with Sometimes. And I guess it's just a sense of struggle about the song and the person in the song, that protagonist in the song. In a way, encapsulates what the band's been about, is that nothing is achieved easily, and the stuff that's achieved easily isn't worth having. And sometimes when you're in your darkest moment, you can actually delve into the human spirit and pull something out which is quite extraordinary. And the version of Sometimes on Screaming Blue is perhaps closer to the way originally it should have been recorded. It's a bit faster and it's a bit angrier, and it sends a shiver down the spine when it changes key in that last chorus. And live, it's one of those ones which usually has everyone jumping up and down, and if they're not jumping up and down by then, we've done something wrong that night.
Hercules is a song about the world going to the brink. Do you think the world is a safer place in 92?
It strikes me that the world is always a fairly precarious place, actually. Just when you think you've got a chance of global stability and world peace, something will come along and shake your confidence in man's sanity. But certainly movements in the last 4 or 5 years, particularly in Europe and Eastern Europe, and positive developments recently in South Africa, even some beginnings of talks and understandings in the Middle East, if not in Northern Ireland, suggest that some progress is made. But you see, Hercules was actually originally about the sinking of the Rainbow Warrior in Auckland Harbour some years ago by French agents, and in a way, I think we're using Hercules as a microcosm for the sort of sabotage and international intrigue that was happening in the 1980s, and which you'd actually like to have come to an end in that decade, as the Cold War finished and as the wall came down in Berlin, and there was at least an appearance of greater world peace. But I'm not sure that's the case, and I guess without being a pessimist or a cynic, it's easy to see difficult period for many countries coming up in the future, including Australia, mainly revolving in the short term the economic peril that Western countries seem to have found themselves in.
The song Powderworks goes a long way back in Midnight Oil's career. Can you remember the first time you played it?
One of the first versions of Powderworks we ever did was one of those Tuesday night concerts that they had for the then 2JJ, which became later Triple J, which was the one radio station in Sydney, Australia, that would play Midnight Oil in the early days, and which kept a lot of bands alive, including Midnight Oil. And I remember the version that we got, which was recorded by Keith Walker, who subsequently went on and recorded Midnight Oil's first album, was full of buzzsaw guitars and white noise and cymbals and completely the over-the-top performance, climaxing in drums scattering all over the stage and people running in all directions. And in a way, Powderworks, which was one of the first songs that Jim and I ever wrote, it's appropriate that it's the last song on Screaming Blue, because in a way we've come full circle. The song itself, which was of course a nuclear song and the perils thereof, was one which we would play occasionally during the 80s as it appeared like we were moving closer to the brink. But it was also a song a bit like Sometimes. It was a song you would end the night with. You couldn't really ever put something after Powderworks. It sort of said it all. Pretty angry song when it was recorded, and a pretty angry version on Screaming Blue too. And you can hear actually Pete Garrett rushing around the stage out of breath in that song, because usually he and I would sort of rush back and have to get top-ups of oxygen and get cold water thrown over us after that song before we could do anything else.
You must have played thousands of shows over the years. Are there any you wish you hadn't done?
Yeah, there was one night in Cleveland. No, I think the Oils have actually been very consistent over the years, and I've had a feeling that if we are going to bother going on tour, and the tours haven't been as long as most bands, because we've tried to concentrate the energy to make sure that all the shows have been good, and to remember that although it might be just another date on a tour for the Oils, it's someone's big night out that have been waiting a long time to see the band, and they actually want to see the band deliver everything. And that's what makes this whole business different than anything else you do, is that you just can't allow yourself off nights. And usually if you go on stage with that attitude, you'll end up feeling a lot better afterwards. There have been times that the band's arrived at some place and looked at the hall and it looks like an acoustic nightmare, and the gear's arrived late and everyone's grumbling, or someone's sick and doesn't want to do the show. And you go on and actually everyone's in a much better mood and feeling a lot better at the end of the show. And this is this great power. If you get that power of the audience, it really is one of the most cathartic and uplifting. And if the audience can really fix your state of mind and your body, I think it's, if they're strong enough. And in the best Midnight Oil shows, that happens.
What are the immediate plans for the band?
Basically, for the rest of '92, Midnight Oil will continue writing for the next studio record, but at the same time, we're getting invitations from different places to play benefit concerts around World Environment Day and Earth Day, and we're hoping to do Earth Day in Boston on the 25th of April, and maybe we'll even get down to Rio, because there's a big United Nations conference and huge gathering of Indigenous peoples in Rio this year, 1992. So we'll do some of those shows, and then we'll charge back home as fast as we can and get in our little fibro studio with the Aussie sun beating down upon us, and try and write some more songs for the next record.